Hi everyone, I hope you're having a great day so far, and welcome to today's webinar, which will focus on designing your IT/OT infrastructure for reduced CAPEX costs. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be here with Mike, Tony, and I. We're really excited to get everything started. So I see some people trickling in. For those of you just joining us, welcome. My name is Emily Patterson, and I'm part of the distribution team here at Grantek. I am currently sitting in our Burlington office in Canada. And on the call today, I have my colleagues, Michael Lohmeyer and Tony Zhang.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, everyone. So my name's Tony, as Emily mentioned. I'm based out of the Allentown office. I've been with Grantek for 7 years. I started in systems engineering. I've been in the energy business, food and bev. I've also done a number of pharmaceutical projects, so things like egg waste systems, fluid bed dryers, alarm management systems, PAS systems. So, and today I'll be presenting the IIT portion of this talk. I put this talk together in collaboration with our network security team.
Thanks, Tony. Good morning. I'm Mike Lohmeyer. I'm based out of our Chicago office in Oak Brook, Illinois. I've been with Grantek 13 years now. I will be discussing the Systec Solutions hardware. Most of my background has been in pharmaceutical and food and bev, which are, as you probably all know, very, very similar. And I'm going to be spending time first doing a quick overview of what the material is that I'm going to show you, and then I'm going to get out of the way and put the camera on the equipment, and then just kind of talk you and walk you through a little demo of each. But I think Tony's going to kick us off first with the infrastructure that supports all the equipment we're going to be showing you.
Keep in mind. So we know that everyone attending has a very busy schedule, but when possible, try to minimize distractions. I know that's hard, but if you were to miss anything, no problem, don't worry. You'll be receiving a recording of this webinar once it's available. And there's a lot of great information coming your way from both Tony and Mike, so feel free to take notes as we go through the presentation and the live demo. And please provide us feedback where you see fit. We're always looking at ways to improve these experiences. Last thing I'm going to go through is on the right-hand side of your screen, you will see a chat window. If you have any questions, pop them into the chat window and we'll address them throughout the presentation or during the Q&A session at the end. I know some of you submitted questions during the registration portion, so we will also be covering those off. We'd love to hear from each and every one of you, so please don't hesitate to reach out with questions like I had said. And the only other thing to note is all of the questions are private and can only be seen by our team. All right, so next up, just a quick little overview of the agenda. Tony will kick off today's webinar by reviewing plant requirements that drive wireless needs, what you may need to consider regarding scalability and capacity, and then also an execution plan for wireless deployment. In addition, Mike will be providing an overview of Cleanroom hardware, and then also showing us, like he mentioned, some products live from our Chicago office. So we're excited to get everything started and underway, and please post any questions that you may have, and we'll review those either during the webinar or at the end during the Q&A session. So Tony, I'm going to kick it over to you.
I want to start off by just talking about the traditional plant network, just to make sure that we're all on the same page here. So what you see on the left here kind of shows a typical layout that you might see. So at the very top is the enterprise zone, so the level 4 and 5. This is where enterprise WAN is. It's also where the internet connection, you'll have internet connection to the rest of your site. So that's connected through a firewall in your DMZ to get to your manufacturing zone. So you obviously want to protect any data transfer between the enterprise and the manufacturing zone. Manufacturing zone will have all your core switches, your core network hardware. It's also going to have things like your centralized servers, so factory stock application servers, your network services, any remote access servers, things like that will live there. At the very bottom is your cell and your area zone, so level 0 and 2, 0 through 2. And this could be connected in this picture. It's a ring topology, a DLR ring, but it could be a star topology. It could be any sorts of things. But originally, when there weren't too many network devices, a structure like this worked quite well. But after the explosive growth over the last couple of years, people are starting to ask the question, will solely wired networks keep pace? Emily, would you mind moving to the next slide? All right, so I do want to talk about just kind of background of the history of wired networks into wireless. So wired networks have been around for quite some time now, and whenever you need to integrate field components to control devices, you would start with using a wired connection. There are a number of protocols out there, things like Modbus RTU, DH+, Rio, and they have started to transition over to Ethernet-based protocols, so Modbus TCP or Ethernet IP, etc. The technology that came before wired Ethernet, so it took some time, but wired Ethernet now is the prevailing technology, and but it took some challenges to get there. We're in a similar transition right now, where wireless technology is starting to become more prevalent, and some sites are still reluctant to make that transition. They don't feel like it's quite reliable enough, and as a result, you see things like pigtails, people setting up some temporary wire connections. And over time, these connections actually turn out to be more permanent than temporary, and that leaves the network exposed to infrastructure cabling issues, exposing the infrastructure to other issues that might show up over time. So despite seeing wireless as sort of an upgrade, the industrial wired connection is still the de facto solution. But as wireless continues to develop, it will continue to gain market share in the industrial space. So deciding when and where to go wireless can be difficult, but I hope that today we can outline some strategies and programs to help make it simpler, increase operation flexibility, improve factory visibility, and just enhance the mobility at a lower cost of deployment than a wired alternative. So just to start off, I'd like to ask this poll question just to get a lay of the room. I just want to ask you all, where are you on your wireless journey in your manufacturing operations? So 4 responses here, just feel free to answer within the chat. There's no wireless available, you're just completely wired right now. You could be wireless available, but there's only a few connected, or you do have a wireless available and you plan to collect a lot more devices. Or the last one, you're mostly wireless. So I see some answers trickling in. I'll give you a few minutes to respond here. It looks like quite a number of you fall in that second category. So wireless is available, but there's just a few devices connected at this point. Okay, some folks are just have no wireless available at all. All right, very cool. And we'll leave this poll up. People can continue to respond, and Emily will cover the results at the end here. So moving on to the next slide, I do want to talk around some of the plant requirements that might drive deciding to use wireless in the first place. So the first thing that most people use to decide whether or not to use wireless is to consider the scale of the deployment. If you're just deploying it within a warehouse, your solution may be very different than if you were trying to deploy a wireless solution across an entire production area. And we'll talk about the different types of wireless technologies that might address different scales of deployments in the next slide. But I'll touch on that in just a minute here. The other piece is the mobility requirements. You might have some client devices that are wireless, but they're not roaming. They might statically be in a certain place, or you might have workstations that move from room to room. It also depends on how fast the client is roaming as well. Things like forklift drivers will be moving quite quickly throughout the plant, so they'll be disconnecting and reconnecting to different access points throughout your facilities. So you want to make sure that they're managed correctly and configured correctly, and keep in mind how their placement are in respect to the paths that the forklift drivers take. And the last piece is any intended use cases. As in our daily lives, we have more mobile devices, we have tablets, we're used to having a mobile workstation. We want to keep in mind how we plan to use wireless within our plants, so that we can address things like how we place access points throughout the plant. The last thing you want is to have all the users in your plant connecting to the same access point, and other access points are just not being used at all. So you want to keep in mind like where exactly things are being used. Last piece is around process versus access data. So anything that's process critical, it may still be best to use wired solutions in that case. But if it's a case where you're just monitoring data, you're just accessing it, reading it, reviewing it, putting it on a SCADA, then in that case, it might be best to use a wireless solution. So thinking ahead and determining what devices would be used, where and how can help define the requirements of a wireless deployment. So this next slide will show you two types of deployments that I would recommend. So within the wireless realm, there are two common types. The first one is a traditional Wi-Fi deployed in an industrial environment, and the second is the industrial wireless product. So the first one on the left can be deployed similar to any traditional Wi-Fi infrastructure in an office. Yeah, sorry, back. Okay, sorry, thanks, Emily. So it consists of a wireless LAN controller, or WLC, you see on the left-hand side at the top there. And then there's strategically placed access points throughout your plant. So this is called the unified wireless model. So the example I talked about earlier, the large warehouse where there's 4 truck drivers utilizing the same wireless scanner and HMI, they'll be roaming all throughout the plant, and using this structure could show them a large amount of benefit. The second solution is shown on the top right there. It'd be typical in a machine or skid that has individual managed access points or industrial gateway that connects to the skid network. And it's purpose-built for this sort of application. So this would be categorized as an autonomous AP model. It doesn't use a centralized management, therefore it doesn't need to have that wireless LAN controller. It's solely configured and managed as its own device, paired with a wireless client that connects to the PLC or I/O devices in its network. So one last example on the bottom right there is a case where, let's say, like you have a robot running along a fixed track with line of sight. It could use this autonomous AP model with a directional antenna. So the robot, the PLC, I/O, they can operate without constant connection, but it is necessary to have that connection still to issue any commands or just monitor and maintain any SCADA information. So in this case, you can make the argument to use that optical data transmitter. It's a similar model to the autonomous AP model, but leverages medialess optical data transmission up to 100 megabytes per second. So next slide, please. So when considering the scalability and capacity of your network, I do want to stress that the wireless network will not fully replace your wired infrastructure. It can be something, the wireless port, it would be wireless and wired connection in your plant. The wireless, it provides you some additional options for scenarios to complement any of your existing architecture. If connectivity requirements change or SCADA or equipment gets reconfigured often, then perhaps the wireless solution would best meet your need. But still, wired is still the best for any fixed assets that you might have. And I would fully encourage you to use the full capacity of your wired network. It's very easy to add a new device to any spare ports. And it's very hard to saturate the data. So if the capacity is there, then continue to do that. But where it would be beneficial to use wireless is if you're starting to push the limits of your wired network. So on to the next slide, please, Emily. So when considering a wireless infrastructure, there's a few things to keep in mind. It works a little bit differently in the wireless realm, and sometimes people are put off by wireless because of some of these concerns, but I want to go through each of these items to show you how we can address each one of these. So the biggest concern is stability. Folks are worried that a wireless infrastructure is not going to provide the stability in the network that a wired one would otherwise. And this can be true in many situations. There's things like collisions that could happen. You could saturate the network more easily. You can have way more devices on an access point than you originally intended. Latency could be unexpected, and the throughput can be heavily reliant on environmental factors. Things like concrete walls, new machinery, they all play a factor in the operation of a wireless network. So it is important to keep this in mind when defining your network, making sure that devices' access points are placed in correct locations and choosing the right devices to build your network off of. There's also, of course, the concern of security. It does have additional layer of security that you would need to overcome. A typical network would use domain user authentication. There's going to be a DMZ and firewalls. And to ensure that traceability in a wireless network, it's even more important to make sure that those infrastructures are in place. You'll obviously want to authenticate and encrypt your data, so using that WPA2 AES encryption will be key. But it would also be important to perhaps build up your network security equipment or services to monitor and flag any suspicious new devices or additional network activity. Segmentation also works a little bit different within wireless. Similar to segmenting LANs to different VLANs, you can leverage the unified wireless model to segment your SSID and just group wireless devices based off of functionality and permit them to have access only to what you require access to. People also have some concerns over loss of features. Something like traditional thin clients that communicate and are provisioned through Pixie Boot may not work anymore once you're talking through wireless. There are solutions out there, though. There's thick clients with enough of an OS to establish that wireless connection. So one popular one is iGel, which is Linux-based and it's secure and it allows you to connect the terminal to a wireless network, much like something that would run Windows, but you don't have to pay for the full-blown Windows license for your SCADA application. Next slide, please. So once you keep those considerations in mind, there are a lot of benefits that you can see from having a wireless infrastructure. The first is the familiarity of it. Most home devices now are wireless, and that trend is not stopping. People are used to it, and they're thinking about how they want to bring that into the workplace. It is very easy to add a device to your network and scale up from there. It's easy to add new access points to support the increasing load of wireless devices. And when you keep the considerations and limitations in mind of wireless, you can find that it can meet your data requirement needs in the most cost-effective way possible. It could have a lower cost of infrastructure and a lower cost of ongoing maintenance. And lastly, it would also be more agile to respond to any plant changes too. So I want to talk about how exactly you could execute a wireless solution. So there are 5 main steps: the advisory, assess, design, deploy, and maintain. The advisory is what you're doing today, coming to this webinar to learn a little bit more about wireless technologies. But I encourage you to continue to learn more about it and build a roadmap for your plan and create any standards that might be relevant for your field. Then it also does play a factor whether you are a greenfield or brownfield site. Obviously, for a greenfield, it would be easier. You can build the site with wireless in mind. But for brownfield applications, it's still very much possible for most layouts. You can survey any existing wireless to determine whether or not you can use different parts of that network or if you can reuse it or improve upon it. The next step after advisory is assess. You want to do a gap analysis, see where the gaps are within your network. If there are certain devices that are, let's say, using all the same access points rather than sharing the workload across multiple access points. Something like the image I have on the top left would help. This is a heat map of where you place different access points within your plan, and just getting a rough feel. This is quite detailed, but you would want to get a rough feel of where the dead zones are within your plan and where you would have the best signal, and make sure that the most critical devices are connected to the access points in the way that you expect it to. This would require some surveying. This would require some modeling to get a feel for what you need to build. So that transitions into the next step, where you would design the actual solution. You build the architecture, things like building out the layouts, architecture drawing, specification, installation scope, create all of that, and then once you have that together, you can finally deploy the solution. Once you deploy it though, you also do want to, you install it, you configure it, you also need to make sure that it deploys the way that you expect. So you would want to perhaps do another survey, much like you did at the beginning, just to see what the coverage area looks like now that you've made the changes. See if there are still any dead spots or if there's any places that need to be adjusted or tweaked. And the last phase is the maintenance of this network. You would want to keep in mind break-fix support. So if any new tank goes in, if there's a remodel, line gets restructured, this can all impact your wireless network. So if there is an impact, then you want to make sure that you're adjusting the network. You want to tune it to still maintain the same integrity that it had previous to the change. So the last piece is also the monitoring and reporting portion of it. As new devices get added, you obviously want to make sure that the devices are property of your company and it's not any malicious technology, any malicious person, whether intentional or unintentional, added to your network. You want to have security applications to ensure that they're actively monitored and protected. So with that, we'll transition to Mike, who will talk about a question to get you guys started on this next portion of this presentation.
Thank you, Tony. Why don't we start with one other poll question? We appreciate the responses that came into the last one. Just curious where everyone is on their CapEx planning. Are you behind, stressed, and wondering how we got to December so quickly, which we probably all do, at least in our personal lives. Head down, planning, feeling a little stressed, but getting through it. Do you feel like you're on target or you're done and ready for 2022? And from the Grantek side, our fiscal year started on December 1, so we were going through the stress all of November. So we're over the hump and running. So a lot of responses coming in, very good. Looks like a lot of you are feeling some stress, many on target, and many done and ready for 2022. So great. Oh, good. Emily, why don't you move us forward? Next slide. I'm going to run through a couple of specifications on the products. You can see them here off to the side. I'm going to walk through and talk through and show them in a second, but it'd just be easier for me to tell you what is in each one of these machines before I get there. They're all coming from Systec Solutions. They're experts in GMP-IT or IT/OT hardware and technology. They're really a best-in-class for pharmaceutical and hygienic production areas. They're from Germany. They are clean room compatible. They are made of stainless steel. They are IP65. People talk about IP ingress protection, and 65, the numbers have to do with the protection of ingress of liquid or dust and particles, which is important. But what's also important is anything that stays on the outside and even doesn't ingress, is you have the ability to wash it down, wipe it down, clean it, and make sure you're not getting any cross-contamination. And when I show them to you, you will see they're designed absolutely for that. Smooth, rounded corners, polished stainless steel. Very difficult for any entrapment to occur. Next slide, Emily. And really the industry is for the most part pharmaceutical, biotech, and cosmetics. Cosmetics has a lot of requirements just like pharma and biopharm. And then we do see some in food and bev as well. And that is driven a lot by the ability to wash these down or put up with very low pH or high pH solutions, pH 1 or 2, or up on the caustic end as well. And then possibly even rinsing them with an isopropyl alcohol or water. But they are designed exclusively for this. Next slide. So this is kind of the rundown of how you build up a system. They're very standard pieces here, and you kind of build it the way you want. Across the top, you'll see waves and pilots. So those are the PC, the monitor, and I'll explain how you can build that up any way you want. There are a number of keyboards to choose from, and I'll show you a couple of those. All sorts of mounting solutions to put them on a wall, on a desk, and in the middle you see all the trolleys, which are units that are on wheels that typically have batteries, so you can run without being plugged into a power cord, and some can be without batteries if you don't need one and want more mobility, and we're going to show that as well. Next slide. So the fundamental unit here, you'll see two screens on the image to the left there. The screens are what are called waves. It's kind of one of the primary products from Systec Solutions. You can build it up from 17-inch diagonal. They go up to 55-inch diagonal. Those are not mobile, of course. They can be a monitor. They can be a full-blown PC. And I'll explain in a minute. You can choose all the options that go in there. You see one here that is showing 2 screens. It's a very common configuration. There might be something like your MES system running on one screen, maybe an HMI software or SOPs running on the other screen, and then an external keyboard beneath it. There are other options that aren't here, but you'll see it in another picture where you can hang scanners on it. They do come with 4 standard configurations in terms of the CPU, the RAM, the SSD, and by having these standard configurations, it really helps in the manufacturing process so that these can be 80 and 90% built in advance. And we all know what the supply chain is like right now. It's very, very complicated and stressed. And by being able to build these, 80, 90% in advance, ship times can be greatly reduced. What can't be done in advance is an option you may want of exactly which keyboard do you want. Do you want a barcode scanner, just have a fork to hold it? Do you want the charging base built in? But those are simple adds afterwards. And then as always, you can custom design these any way you want. But it's something that Systec has done over the last year to have these standard configurations to really expedite delivery time, and it's working well. Next slide, please. There are units that have inductive charging. You'll see 2 versions here. These bases have the ability to do inductive charging. You obviously need to build the charging into the wall as well while you're doing that. It can have 1 or it can have 2. It just speeds up the amount of charging that occurs, and you can charge twice as fast. You can run these for up to 2 10-hour shifts between charges, but it's important to note that as you put these charging stations in the areas where your operators would be using them, they can be charging all the time. So even if part of the time, part of the day, they're near a charging station, that's great. These things can run essentially indefinitely if you set these up right, and you're periodically charging and keeping them up and running. And what you do is you get rid of the power cord that has to be moved or on the floor or get in the way. But it's a great addition to the trolleys, the mobile units that we have. And I'll show you some of these in just a second. Next slide, please, Emily. Good. Now we have tablets. We have 3 different tablets. I'm going to be able to show you one here. We have a Zebra tablet. We have 3 choices in tablets. One of them is the Microsoft Surface Pro. The 7 Plus is what's shipping now. The 8 is coming soon. There's the Zebra ET51, and then, of course, the Apple iPad Pro. All of these are available, and I'll bring one over here in just a second. They are the actual unit from each of the manufacturers put into a stainless steel case. And you have all, I'll bring it over now because I want to show you how they charge. We put the actual unit in the case. The charging, you want to make sure that you have maintained the integrity. You'll see the charging here, the connectors. I'm not sure how well this comes through on a camera. This is keyed. It's keyed mechanically. You'll see a bump at, say, noon, and then down below one at, say, 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock. Which forces this to connect in only one way. What you can't see over the camera, it's also magnetically keyed, so if I try to turn it in 180 degrees off, it just literally won't go. But these are cleanable. They can be wiped down with all the solutions we talked about earlier. The tablet, as you can see, it's stainless steel, Gorilla Glass, the unit's inside. There's an optional handle, which makes it easier to carry. I mean, obviously, these do pick up some weight. They are, built inside. And then I'm going to try to show, and the sooner I do this, I can take these off. I'm actually wearing 3 layers of gloving right now, and it has multi-touch. So typically you're not doing this from the side, but you'll see I can touch this with multiple fingers and it will draw across there. And you have that ability. I have 3 gloves on, and I'll just kind of take them off now so you can see. Plus, I'd like to get them off. Typically, your operators might not be wearing 3. There's 2 and number 3. So you do have that capability built in there. And then they come with the 3 different tablets, as I said. What's interesting is you can mount them on that trolley. You can carry them around. If you're going to take them from place to place and set them on desks, we have brackets that can be put there. They've got standard Visa mounts. If you want to mount it on a wall, mount it on a desktop. Depending if it's down low, you can have it set at a low view angle. If you turn it this way, if it's up a little higher, you can have a higher view angle. Or this is what's actually mounted on the trolley that I'm going to show you, and you can roll it around from room to room and take it wherever you go. Those are the units as well, and those are exceedingly popular for people who are getting going in their digital journey or getting into some of the more tougher areas, setting up the wireless access points that Tony was just discussing, and having a tablet is a great way to get going. So that's all available as well. Next slide, Emily. Oh yeah, we're showing them right here. The Apple Pro is the one showing the handle. The handle is available on all of them. I should mention the screen sizes. I mean, they're the standard items you can buy. We just have them put inside the stainless steel and the glass so you can take them into a GMP area. But the Surface Pro is 12.3 inches, the Zebra is 10.1, and the Apple is 11 inches diagonal. So there are 3 choices there in terms of that. Next slide. Oh yeah, I already went through the options. I'm going to show you the rest when we stand up, so we can skip that slide. Good, and this is the Trolley Slim. I have one of these that I'll show you in just a second. You'll notice a couple versions here. If you look at the second one from the left, it has casters on the bottom, and they can be lockable with your foot, lock and unlock. This is one you can grab it by the pole and you can roll it, 5 feet, you can roll it, 100 feet down the hallway, and it's very, very portable in that regard. You can put the little Visa mount that I just showed you on top and have a tablet up there. You can have a larger support, which I'll show you in just a second, and put a larger computer up there. Very, very mobile. The leftmost one, you'll see the way the operator is leaning it. It has casters that, as you set it down, it stays in place. It's not movable. They don't turn. But as you tilt it to about a 45-degree angle, the front casters do have an ability to spin. There's really a vertical axis, if you will, going through those wheels at the bottom rather than a horizontal. So you can lean it down and roll it a little bit from side to side. If you're moving it from one operator station to another, or if an operator needs to move it from one place to 10 feet over or something, very great way to go about it. If you're going to regularly move it a longer distance, you probably want to put the other wheels on it. Otherwise, the same construction, all stainless steel, IP65 washdown, just more options to have available. So I'll show you one of those in just a second. And the height you can choose, of course. There are standard heights, but if for some reason you have a different height you want, that can certainly be done. Next slide. And we have some laboratory stations. The rightmost one I will show you, we have one sitting here, but there are a number of ways to take waves, pilots, tablets, and have them sitting on a desk. They're movable. If you want truly portable, you'd want a tablet, but these are certainly movable. If you notice the leftmost one and the rightmost one, they have wide bases. I'll show you one of those. They're intentionally somewhat wide and fairly thick and heavy. That is for the purpose of providing stability so they don't get knocked over. The leftmost one is extremely minimal. There's not even an external keyboard on it, but there's a soft keyboard built into all of these. And then the one on the right has a little more beef to it, and you can add the external keyboard and hang a scanner off to the side and do that as well. Next slide. And then there are 2 other units. So the guts, the computing power, if you will, that's in these units can be purchased 2 other ways and packaged 2 other ways. The MODI, which you see to the left, is an in-wall unit, again for low cost, low impact in your construction of a room. These are small. They're 7-inch diagonal. They're 10-inch diagonal. Typically used to display information, although an operator can go and use it as an input device as well. They mount right into the wall. They require DC power, which you can bring in 12 volt or 24 volt. You can also run PoE, power over Ethernet. So if you've got a switch with PoE, you can certainly use that. If you're going to put in a bunch of these, you could certainly put in a different switch or add a layer to your switches to have PoE. If you're just going to put in one, there are PoE injectors that can be added to a single, Cat6 line. But it's a great way to put it in and not be running a lot of new power. Next to it, the control, that would really grow in the panel of a control system. It just mounts in from the back like anything else. The MODI is a great edge device. If there's a particular HMI software you use, we have certainly tested it with something from Ignition, Inductive Automation. And there are a couple of ways to architect it. If you have just 1 or 2 units, there's a way of doing it. Or if you're going to have many of these around your facility, there's a way of doing it. Reach out to us and let us know. We can share the architecture with you. But it is a great way to put an edge device out there. and display data from whatever system repository you have that you want to make available to your operators, whether it's production or ambient conditions, HVAC in the room and things like that. So all different ways of looking at the data. So that covers that. The last thing I do, there's one more slide. I'm going to show this to you, but I want to make sure we cover this. As you're putting in your wireless, as Tony was discussing, getting to some of the harsher environments or hazardous environments, we're going to show you a product that we like that works in these areas. If you have solvent processes, solvent recovery, alcohol, dust or vapors, it's an area where you can put a wireless access point up and withstand the class 1 or 2, div 1 or 2 ATEX ratings. The point I would make, while these enclosures can withstand or are built to take any commercial off-the-shelf, Rockwell, Stratix, Cisco switch, whatever, they have to be put in there by Extronics. Excuse me. It is the manufacturing and putting these together, sealing it. You can all imagine why that is one of the most critical pieces of this. So it is not user done. These will not be shipped out and allow the user or you even to just put them in and then install them. They would come completely installed and ready to go. The antenna, I'll show you screwing one on and off. Be great. Go to Extronics websites. These antennas are very specifically designed. They can be taken on or off. You don't need any special tools. It doesn't have to be a hot job. And it's a great way to get into some of the more difficult places in the plant. So that was really it. I'm going to try to readjust my camera, get out of the way, and show you some equipment. Hang on. How we doing on the camera there? Is that a good angle, Emily? So I mentioned the Trolley Slim before. Here it is. Hopefully you can see the base. This one has the wheels on it. It's not the one you have to tip. This is showing the Visa mount at this low angle because it's kind of a hip height. If it were a taller pole, you would flip this Visa mount and the view angle to the operator then would be different. But this is it. It's relatively lightweight. They run anywhere from about 25 to 35 pounds. I mean, you can pick them up, but the point is to roll them around. They can come with the fixed base or the other casters. It is a great way to go about it. You can also put some slightly bigger ones on, as I showed you, the pilot or the control. I mean, if you do that, there's a number of options for bringing power in, but it's a very lightweight way of getting a mobile device in your building. The other things we had shown, these are the waves, which are a little bit bigger. This one I'm showing, hopefully you can see this one. All touch could all be done with the gloves on. I've already taken mine off, but I'm showing it here with the soft keypad. There are 2 different keypad options you can put on here, and I'll show you each of them because I've got them handy here. If I turn this sideways, you should be able to see the back. This adapter device is to mount this unit to almost any fixed or mobile device. And the little cap here kind of looks like a Starbucks cup. That is where the wireless adapter is. These can be wired or wireless, but that is the wireless adapter in here. You'll notice on this one, this happens to be a demo unit. You're seeing 4 different connectors here. I don't know that anyone would have this in a production environment. This just happens to be a sales demo showing how you can do, like, what's the most extreme thing you can do. And then you could bring any sort of cable in or out of there if you wanted to. And the base, you can see down here, the base is where you have batteries. You can put enough batteries in there, either lead acid or lithium ion. You can get 2 10-hour shifts, and then it would have to be recharged. And that is the heavier base. This is the one you could certainly have 2 different screens on it. This is an RFID NFC reader to get things like biometric authentication, a band or something. You could just swipe it over here and read it. So that's available as well. And then this one, if you look at the base is a little bit smaller. It has only 3 wheels. It's kind of halfway between the very small one and this heavier one. You see the device on here. This one I don't have a keyboard on right now, but you're seeing the touch screen. I've done this with gloves on. It has a 178-degree viewing angle, but it is a multi-touch, and you can have that there. What you can also choose from, I'll bring over these one at a time. It has 2 keyboards. This one is glass, very much like typing. You can see the reflection, very much like typing on your iPad. This is half of a hinge. It would fit in there. I was just swapping this out to do different customer demo and thought, well, I had it apart, I'd leave it apart. It's a lot easier to bring up to the screen. It's very much like typing on an iPad. It is glass. All of this is printed on the back side, so as you wash this, you don't have to worry about the electronics or anything. And they are sealed stainless steel and ready to work out in any environment. And this is, as I said, hard sheet of glass. You type on it just as you would on an iPad. And the other option, it's referred to as a foil keyboard. It has tactile feedback. I don't know that you can hear it, but there's actually a slight amount of clicking that goes on. The operator does get tactile feedback as you do that, but you have your keypad and your touchpad all built in. They both work well. They are both all washed down everything you could ask for. It's very much a user preference as to which way you'd prefer to go. And if you change them out, you can do that as well. But these are the two different options that can be put on there. I'm going to move to show some other equipment, unless, Emily, are there any questions I need to answer while I'm here?
If you want that on over.
All right, I'm going to do a little shift here. And you can let me know if I get my camera correct. How are we doing? There we go. So a couple of other things here. This is one of the laboratory units. This is the base I was referring to. It is somewhat heavier. It provides a lot of stability. This one has a little bit of a post. This is the one that would typically you would use if you had both the wave and you were going to have a larger keyboard coming off it. It gives you a little more room to do that. This device up here, the device adapter, let me show you one of those. Hopefully the light will work and my camera will work. This rectangle in the bolt pattern is standard on every mounting adapter we have, whether it's fixed or mobile or whatever size the unit is. And then you see all the different access points and mounting points. But the great thing is if you have a wave mounted on a wall or a trolley or anything that's fixed or mobile and you move from one place to the other, the mounting always works. And then the last thing here, this is the Xtronics enclosure where you put like a Cisco switch or Rockwell Stratix or anything to create a wireless access point. As you can tell by the design, it is designed to be in a hazardous duty. And if you have intrinsically safe devices, wireless devices, you can now start reading barcodes, doing things out in areas where normally it might not be safe to have the device. And if you do go online with Xtronics or on our website, you can read about the antennas they use, the ability to remove them without needing special tools, and it doesn't have to be a hot job, and it makes it a lot easier for anyone to do. Any questions that have come in on those?
We'll have a few to cover off at the end.
Good. That really covers the spectrum of it, and it's all available. And we are seeing, well, we've seen a tremendous amount of tablets going out and smaller devices and wireless, and it's a lower cost and less effort to get devices out in areas where you haven't had them in the past. It really speeds things up. But doing the design and planning up front that Tony was talking about is very, very important. Were there any other questions out there?
I think we have a few that have come in, so we'll just kind of wrap up today by saying thank you so much to everybody for joining our webinar. We're going to open up the floor now for any questions that you may have. I've seen a few trickle in, but if you haven't had the opportunity to type something in, this would be a great opportunity to place that into the chat window. If we don't get to your question today, don't worry, we'll send you a follow-up email after the webinar to make sure that we cover off everything that people have asked. So yeah, we'll cover that off right now. One thing I wanted to touch on first was our poll responses. So the first poll that we had, which was, where are you currently on your wireless journey in your manufacturing operations? We had 50% were wireless available, but few devices connected. We had 38% wireless available, plan to connect more devices. We had 0% that were wireless dominant, and 13% were no wireless available. They were completely wired as of right now. So just some interesting stats for us to view. And then the second poll is where we were all at with our 2022 CAPEX planning. We had nobody who was behind schedule and stress, so that's great. That's what we love to hear. We had quite a few people, 56% are heads down in planning. 22% were on target, and again, 24% were done and feeling ready to take on 2022. So that's great. We did have a few questions come in. The first question that we saw was for inductive charging solution, what is the IP rating and cleanability? So I can touch on that. The IP rating for inductive charging is IP65, and cleanability will be the same for any other Systec products. So I know Mike went through a whole slew of kind of cleaning agents that were available for inductive charging. So I hope that answers the question. And if it doesn't, then you can always ping us with any additional questions in terms of inductive charging. Another question that we received was, what is the depth of the recess monitors? So I'm assuming that we're talking about the MODI and the control. For both of those, it should be 37 millimeters for both. So it's relatively small. It's really just the depth of the units themselves. So it's a good solution for anything that's kind of a smaller scale. Really, depending on your wall structure, is another important component when we're looking at in-wall units, but they do also have on-wall solutions for both the control and the MODI. So there's definitely some options available for those. We had a couple other questions come through. I believe, Tony, this one will be for you. Sorry, I'm looking off on multiple screens, but is security an investment or an expense? Which is a great question.
Good question. So cybersecurity costs, it can be an operational or CAPEX depending on how you want to approach it. So investing in security architecture, in that case, that would be CAPEX. Using a MSSP, so managed security service provider, would be more of an OPEX cost. But either way, you should consider getting yourself security infrastructure as a layered approach. I don't consider security an investment since you don't really get a return, but what you do get is a risk reduction.
Any other questions? Pop them in. But I did see one other one come through. Mike, one question came through. Would you mind showing us the charging cables for the tablet again? Is that part of the line for you to go grab?
I have the charging cable and the tablet. So here's the charging cable. And the other end of the charging cable goes into, obviously, the power converter, AC to DC. There are two options for that. One is just kind of a basic plastic one that can be anywhere. There is an IP65 stainless steel unit that can be done as well. And then maybe this side was of interest. I'm not sure how close I can come and have it still focus. And then the other side of that, the receiving end, is here on the end, on the edge.
Okay, Tony, another question coming your way. What are legacy manufacturing sites having to do to implement 4.0 strategies?
Sure. So naturally, it's going to depend on where the customer's at and where they want to go. So Industry 4.0, it's not a concrete thing that you have or you don't. It's more of a broad concept where you draw from the technologies and the principles that meet your business needs. But that being said, Industry 4.0 almost always depends on connectivity and communication. So enabling machines to talk to each other, on-premise information systems, and to the cloud is critical for Industry 4.0, and it can be a challenging obstacle to overcome for manufacturers who are further behind. So if you're looking for a solid foundation that's going to enable a lot of different 4.0 technologies, I'd start by taking a serious look at connectivity and communications. And there's a lot of IoT technologies that can help you cross-link that faster and cheaper than before.
Systec tablet enclosures and put my own tablet into it?
That is a question that always comes up. The answer is no. You have to buy it like this with it already built in, and that is because the only way to make sure that this is properly sealed for ingress protection and all the right adhesive used to tolerate, acidic and caustic and alcohol washdowns is for Systec to do that themselves. So you do have to buy the whole unit, the enclosure and the tablet inside as one part number.
Thanks, Mike. One other question for you. I believe they're chatting about probably the HMIs and what is the largest screen size that we have available for the HMIs themselves?
They go up to 55 inch, and 55 inch is not portable or mobile.
Great, yeah. Primarily an on-wall solution.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, another one for Mike. How do I add a barcode scanner to these units? I know you touched on it a little bit before, but maybe we could chat through the two separate kind of ways that we can.
Yes. So there are two ways to attach it. One is to just literally have, I don't have one here, a stainless steel fork that hangs off the side, and you hook the barcode scanner in it, and you have to set it somewhere else to charge. And it's a Bluetooth connection, so it's still wireless, which is very handy. The other is you can, instead of adding that fork, you actually add the charging station. So whenever the operator is not using it and sets it down, it's resting there and charging at the same time. It can be done either way. And on the sides of every unit, there are these 30 millimeter openings where they're screwed and gasketed now. But inside there are USB connections, and you can add the dongles for Bluetooth. You can bring that out to a barcode scanner cradle, and away you go. But those are the two principal options.
For reviewing all of that. I think those were all the questions that we have had submitted so far. So if we missed something, please post it in the chat, or you can reach out to us. We just wanted to say thanks again so much to everybody for attending the webinar today. We really appreciate your time. A reminder, you can reach out to us via info@grantech.com, and you will also be receiving a recording of this presentation. So nice to have on hand if you did need to look back at anything, but like I said, you can always contact us at info@grantech.com. In addition, Mike, Tony, and I are all active on LinkedIn, so feel free to connect with us, stay in touch. And again, we really appreciate everyone's time. Thank you so much to Tony and Mike for presenting today. We really appreciate it. And again, reach out with any questions, but we hope everyone has an amazing rest of your day. Take care.